And basically that was the end of my dream.
Now that reminds me of what we were talking about back in my Titan Point series, where all of these places on the map are the supercomputer hubs, sort of supercomputer cloud nodes on the quantum computer. Oh, that reminds me, looking at this map reminds me of the segment we're going to do on the crystal skulls, how it also had the nodes on the ley lines in the old world system, grid system, which was a wireless grid system, like Tesla technology grid system. Interesting. Anyway, we'll get to that later. But this map, we were talking about the system, the beast system that they've built, and these big windowless skyscrapers in these different areas and what they actually were and that type of thing. And then we talked about a series of dreams and visions that I personally had about these nuclear explosions. And I compared mine to some of the, the most famous dreams and visions from American prophets and Russian prophets that talked about seeing this coming invasion of the United States of America and these multiple nuclear explosions. And in there, I had mentioned that I think we might be misinterpreting what we are seeing, that these nuclear explosions, I felt like, might be our own military taking out the supercomputer. And listening to her prophetic dream, it makes me think that again. And I'm not saying that that's absolutely it. I don't know. I'm just like anybody else. I'm trying to interpret what I've seen through the lens of what we know so far. And that always, changes as we learn more and grow. But at this point, what I am saying is that it looks like this could happen from either side. When the shit hits the fan and we see the lights finally go out and the internet finally go out, are we really going to know immediately what is going on? It could be the attack from the AI taking out the grid, or it could be the attack from the people who are fighting the AI. And yes, there will be people fighting the AI. I've noticed a lot of people just cannot accept that there could be, quote, white hats, but think of them as white robes then, because God is not dead. For you to say that God is dead and that he isn't going to raise up a standard against this thing, or that he is powerless, I mean, man, I'd check yourself for sure. God is not dead, God is not defeated, and there absolutely are white robes. Regardless of what the battle looks like in the natural in this 3D, we cannot get distracted and forget that this battle is much bigger than us, much, much bigger than us. And it's not just raging here in the 3D. It's raging in the next dimension and the next dimension and the next dimension. This is the war to end all wars, and it's going to be ugly. I don't know how much of this we will be here to see. I think a lot of us are still praying for the rapture. Count us worthy to escape what is coming upon the earth for sure. But either way, regardless of how it goes down, it's not going to shake my faith. I know the Lord. If you have a personal relationship with the Lord, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The peace of Christ rests upon you. I mean, these are horrible things to even have to think about or talk about, but it's happening, and some of us are going to have to live through different varying degrees of it. And you're going to need that peace that surpasses understanding to walk through this and keep your mind straight and not lose faith in God. He absolutely is going to win this thing. But like the Lord has shown me, and she says that he has shown her as well, this is a formidable enemy, and it predicts our moves. It knows us so well from reading our minds and monitoring us. It's been monitoring us, data mining us for years and years and years. So like the Space Odyssey clip I've played a couple of times, if humanity takes a step to disable it by nuking all of the supercomputer nodes, you would most assuredly see what we have already seen in real life. All of these UFOs going over the nuclear facilities and the military bases. We had Maelstrom Air Force Base here in the United States. Remember, we've done videos on that. We've had a couple here in the United States where the UFOs hovered over the missile silos and they were able to disarm the warheads, like sequentially turn them off one by one. The same thing happened in Russia over their nuclear facilities. Same thing happened in the UK with that pyramid-shaped shape-shifting UFO in Rendlesham Forest. That was a nuclear facility that it scanned and was decoding. So if you want more information on that, please do go back to the past videos and watch those clips, because the soldiers that were there, they've all done conferences and they've come out and explained what they saw. And it wasn't just turning off the warheads sequentially. Some of them reported that the UFOs hacked the coordinates. So it was using our own nuclear missiles to blow up what it wanted to blow up. And it got right down to the countdown, and then it didn't do it. It was almost like a show of force, like, oh yeah, you're going to blow me up? Look, I can turn these missiles on you. So all of this worry about, is Iran going to nuke us? Is Russia going to nuke us? Are we going to nuke them? You know, all of that, it's really the least of our worries. And it may even be a cover story for this AI war that has been going on. But anyway, I started out playing her prophetic dream because we were talking about the cabal trying to resurrect their ancestral gods, namely Lucifer, the leader of the rebellion. They want to externalize the hierarchy. They want to resurrect what God wiped off the earth in the antediluvian world. So you probably remember when she started telling this dream, she had said to go back and watch her previous dream that she had in 2022. Because she had previously been shown something along these lines. So I'm going to play a clip from that right now.
Okay, so I had this dream the December of 2022. It was right before New Year's turning into 2023. So in my dream, there were we were inside of a lab facility, and there were a bunch of scientists and programmers who were just working hard on AI. They were all together just working on AI and building this super computer. And the thing is, it was connected to this being. So this lab, I wish I could find some pictures. If I do, I'm going to post it right here for you to see what I'm trying to explain here. Literally just rows of computers of people working on AI. And then in the center of it, there was a huge tube. And there was a huge angel, almost twice the height of a normal man. And he was beautiful. And I felt that this angel was evil. I felt that this angel was a fallen angel. And so in this middle console, this tube was clear inside. There was a beautiful angel with huge wings, white wings around him. And he was asleep. And he was actually bounded. He was bounded. And his eyes were closed. And in the center of his heart, he had like a huge breastplate armor on, and he had longish kind of wavy hair. I think it was blonde. He was just glowing with a lot of light. And so he was really big. And his heart, there was this glowing core, you know, Iron Man. It was kind of like that, you know, that core that was placed on the heart, where the heart is. So that was what I saw. There was this just glowing thing, this gadget on his heart. And I can't really explain what it is. It's not from this world. The scientists were working and working. And then they got to a point where they started to panic. They realized that their research was getting out of control, and they were building something that they cannot control, and it was going to destroy them. And it was going to do a lot of evil. They knew this, and the scientists tried to stop it, but it was too late. And so the angel, this fallen evil angel in the middle, woke up, and his eyes opened up, and then he broke free out of the glass, and he started to take over everything. He started to kill everyone, kill so many people. And the thing is, because we're in this scientific lab kind of environment, he started to take over all these different facets of our daily lives. You know, he started taking over different softwares and different aspects of society. And so this angel that's connected to AI, he started to control everything. And I saw people, in their homes. They were, playing with altered reality games like AR, and they were just playing so much games, and they're having so much interaction with AI. Like AI has been incorporated fully into society already, and that angel was able to manipulate those people who, are fused with the AI, and they were brainwashed, and many of these people died. And I was in the lab. I was in the lab too. And the thing is, I had the Holy Spirit, and the Holy Spirit was covering me, and I was protected by the Holy Spirit. And so he could not harm me or kill me. And I think that is symbolic of the fact that, this is a very clear judgment of the Lord, one of the fallen angels he's using in the end days through the technology of AI. AI is like a golden calf that we have created in this day and age. We worship this technology. It's just like the Israelites creating a golden calf when they came into the wilderness from Egypt to worship. But this AI, we literally idolize it. We idolize technology, and we built this godlike technology, but it's coming back to bite us. It's coming back to judge us. And we did it to ourselves, really. And the Lord allowed it because this was the human will. The collective will of humanity created this monstrosity to bring about its end.
That's really the main reason this is called the singularity. Regardless of what you call it, it will be the universe waking up. So does God exist? Well, I would say not yet.
Revelation 13, verses 14 and 15. It deceived those who dwell on the earth, telling them to make an image of the beast that had been wounded by the sword and yet had lived. The second beast was permitted to give breath to that image of the first beast, so that the image could speak and cause all who refused to worship it to be killed. Okay, those dreams and visions were from our sister Christy. Her channel is called Pursuing Jesus with Christy. And as always, the links will be down below in the description box. Please stop by over there and show her some love and let her know that we appreciate her faithfulness before the AI deletes her channel. Just kidding. We hope not. Pray against that. We pray for you, Christy. Okay, so there was a lot of really great information in there, but the one takeaway that I was going for was this genetic engineering program, that it's not just artificial intelligence that is going on here. They also have a genetic engineering program. They are creating a body for this thing to wear. The second takeaway from that I wanted to point out was that this was an angel. She said it was beautiful and bright. It was a giant. That this was not a person or a politician. And I know there's a lot of people who can't get out of the mindset that this is just going to be a politician, like, Donald Trump or Barack Obama or Vladimir Putin or somebody like that. And even if these, they are clones or whatever, there is absolutely no way. It's like I've said for years, there is absolutely no way that any one of them would stand up behind a microphone and go, oh, by the way, I'm God. If Barack Obama says, hey, you guys, I'm actually God. I created you. I mean, nobody's going to believe that. If Donald Trump says, yeah, MAGA, I'm God. I'm actually God. I'm your Lord God and Creator. I mean, all of the populist movement in MAGA would turn their back and walk away. Nobody's going to believe that he is God. I mean, there might be a couple, but with the same way with Barack Obama. But I noticed in the truth movement, there's a huge thing about Barack Obama being the Antichrist. And I do believe he has the Antichrist spirit. We've shown tons of examples of that. But I think it's almost more like one of the false prophets supporting, ushering in this genetically engineered actual beast. Because Barack Obama was indeed the one who gave all the funding when he was president to the brain mapping initiative for the transhumanist movement. He was also the one that did the LED, mandatory LED changeover to Li-Fi LED bulbs. He was also the one who did Jade Helm, putting artificial intelligence at the helm of the military. He also completely purged the Nuclear Strategic Command. All this is on my website if you want to go see it name by name, of dozens of people he removed from their positions and replaced them with Marxists. And even Andrew Basiago says that in Project Pegasus, one of the young boys that was in his class was Barack Obama. So I do believe that he's in the cabal. I do believe that he's all up in this and works under the Antichrist spirit. But no, I just do not believe that the Antichrist is going to be a politician. I believe the narrative they have set up is the return of the Nephilim. It's this UFO, the coming of the UFOs, our saviors and creators. You know, the History Channel, Ancient Aliens, they say they created humanity by seeding the earth with their DNA. And they can prove that with a DNA test because we know that they contaminated the human gene pool in Genesis 6. So they'll invert that as evidence instead of saying, oh yeah, we're the reason why you guys have deformities and disease and, you know, all of this in your human genome. No, they'll say, see, there's the evidence. We seeded the earth with our DNA and we can prove it with a DNA test. So for a decade, they've set up the narrative that they are our creators, and the same way with our saviors. They have shown the alien abductees all of these cataclysms and stuff that are coming, and then they've told them to go back and tell everybody that they're coming to save us, right? That they have technology. They're coming with all of this high technology. They've shown them nuclear wars, and they tell them, oh, we're coming. We have the technology to stop nuclear war and free green energy to set humans free from all of this destroying the planet, right? So they've been programming that while they're simultaneously programming us through the political system that we're the cause of everything horrible on the earth, us humans driving around in our cars and everything. But in reality, they are the old world order, and they have had all of this technology and withheld it from us just for this event. Not just for money, so that their descendants could rob us, the robber barons, through all their big oil companies and stuff. No, they can print money. It's not for money. They kept it secret for this event, that the Antichrist is a genetically engineered body, a resurrection of these fallen angels, and it will be augmented, just like they are augmenting us with artificial intelligence for the transhumanist movement. They're doing that same technology into this avatar that they created. But it isn't just contained inside that body like Barack Obama or somebody. It's the AI that mimics God's omnipresence, God's omniscience, God's omnipotence. That's, like she said, it's in the ether. It's in the Wi-Fi and the Li-Fi. It's literally in the air, the prince of the power of the air. And that's why people will bow down and worship this thing. That's why the deception is so powerful. They tried to create a god, and it has lying signs and wonders. When it can literally go into people's minds and give them augmented reality, virtual reality visions, it can project in their minds where they think anything is happening in the sky. It can give people a virtual reality experience of the return of Christ. It can make people hear things in their mind. It can make people see things. It can send its hive mind false prophets to you, and they can tell you what you had for breakfast. They can tell you everything about you, everything about your family. That, you know, these are lying signs and wonders that God said that if it were possible would even deceive the elect. It's not a politician. And going back to this quest for the Holy Grail to get the DNA samples and everything they need, one of the reasons I believe that it's the return of the Nephilim and involved with the UFOs is because all of these cloning cults and technocracy cults are always woven into these UFO cults with this ancient aliens narrative. And you'll notice that word right there, that French word, the R-A-E-L, that's what the Raelian cult is based on. The UFO cults, the clonade, right? They start clonade. They made a new Eve through cloning, genetic engineering. And their symbol is both a swastika and what they're calling the Star of David, which is not the Star of David. But that's their symbol. That's all of these things together. When people keep saying, oh, it's the Jews are doing it, when it's clearly not the Jews. Jesus Christ himself said it multiple times. These are Satanists. They are not Jews. Right here, Revelation 3:9 is just one of those verses. He says, the synagogue of Satan, Satanists, the synagogue of Satan, which say they are Jews and are not, but do lie. If you are a Christian in the truth community and you are still saying the Jews, the Jews, the Jews, the Jews, are you calling Jesus a liar? He says it's the synagogue of Satan, that these are Satanists masquerading as Jews. That doesn't mean every Jew any more than it means because what the Pope is doing and the satanic rituals that go on underneath the Vatican, that means all Christians. It's the Christians, it's the Christians, it's the Christians who are doing child sacrifice. No, we're not. It's not the Christians and it's not the Jews. It's the Satanists, the synagogue of Satan. Will you be brave enough to call it what it is? And this satanic cult is not just wearing the mask of Jews. That is one arm of the control. They also wore the mask of the Nazis. They also wear the mask of the Marxists. Just kind of depends on what nation you're in. They also wear the mask of the Vatican, right? They're also in the UFO community with the Raelianism, and they're also in the technocracy with the cloning program. All of this thing, we talk about celebrity clones and the Lebensborn breeding program. They're cloning. Yes, they are cloning. Yes, it's these same people from the old world. This is the old world order. They're still doing it. Now we call them the new world order, but it's nothing new. And again, with Elon Musk and the technocracy all up in the Raelian cult, his child who was born, we talked about it in last video. If you missed that, please do go back and watch the first video, The Entity, because it really is the introduction to this work. And I went into a lot more detail on this stuff. But yeah, that all of Elon Musk's children were created in a lab, that these are the genetic engineering programs. And the child that his surrogate, what's her name, that singer, I don't know, doesn't matter. But she's been carrying these lab-grown babies. She's the surrogate. You know, these are all IVF babies by their own admission. I'm not making this up. See how they literally put the Raelian in the name, in her name? And that's what Kanye West was actually posting about in that controversial tweet that all the anti-Semitism uproar was about. He wasn't saying anything anti-Semitic. He was talking about the Raelian cult, the technocracy. These people who are secretly cloning people, and they have a breeding program and a genetic engineering program, an Ubermensch program. So like here, this is Stop Anti-Semitism. They said, horrifying, a swastika embedded within a Jewish star. Does Kanye West have to physically hurt a Jewish person before you act at Elon? Ridiculous. Or is it? Is it ridiculous, or are they in the satanic cult and they just wanted to shut Kanye up? He even mentioned the genetic engineering, that Elon Musk clearly looks absolutely nothing like the guy they say is his father. And Kanye was saying, can't you see he's got a little Chinese in him? That he was genetically engineered from Chinese DNA. And you can really see it in the pictures of Elon when he was younger. So, you know, Kanye knows something. He's on the inside of something. And we know that Arizona Wilder, the testimony from the first video, the MK Ultra whistleblower, she talked about them using genes from dolphins to create this synthetic telepathy, because dolphins have used the scalar waves and are considered, quote, telepathic. And then we see those symptoms in autistic children. They use dolphins for therapy because it soothes the autistic children, that they're on the same wavelength somehow. And as far as the cryptids in the underground bases, the cryptid super soldier creatures, yeah, they use dogs, they use cats, they use bats. I mean, the whole vampire thing has always been related to DNA from bats. So even though vampires allegedly don't like sunlight, they don't need it because they can see in the dark. They have night vision. And that leads me to the next thing that I wanted to show you. Just like I was saying, we wrongly assume that humans who lived in earlier eras than us, our ancestors, that they see the same way we do, in the same frequency, that they couldn't have had a broader, a larger spectrum of reality. For we assume that all animals on the earth see exactly like we do, that they're not 1 foot in another dimension or anything. They must be in the same exact subset of worlds that we are. Well, likewise, we assume that these bloodlines, especially the ones that came from around the Rhine River area, that spread out all through, Bohemia, Bavaria, all through Germany and into France, especially those, and especially where we see the Gothic architecture, that those bloodlines, we assume that they just liked decorations different than us, because there is such a stark difference between the kingdom of heaven architecture, the cathedrals that are adorned with beautiful angels and just incredible beauty. You just want to just stand and stare at it. And the Gothic cathedrals that are adorned with gargoyles and all sorts of demonic looking creatures and people who look like they're screaming and being torn apart and witches and all of that. So how can you have two civilizations that appear to be literally seeing two different realities? You can tell from the pictures on the screen right now that there is a sort of, subconscious idea that these cathedrals didn't sit like they sit right now in broad daylight, how we look at them, and just like, oh, they're historic Gothic cathedrals. But we have this image in our head of, Transylvania, and that it's dark, that it really is a dark age, that they were really living in this dark reality where there were demons and gargoyles flying around, and, that it was a different world. But yet we can see the archaeological remains right here in our material world. But again, I think our understanding of the world is based on wrong assumptions, that you can't have two different cultures literally living in two different realms, perceiving two different realms, yet living side by side. And when you listen to these realm walker testimonies, every single one of them report that when they're in that frequency, that it is this world, but it's like a different version of this world, an astral realm where it is always dark. It's always dark, maybe like a dusk at the brightest, and that there's, like we talk about the red aurora borealis skies and everything. Well, they report that in these astral realms when they get frequencies shifted. Well, I believe there is evidence, a vast amount of evidence, the more I look into ancient history, that not all people on the earth are in the same frequency range. So the first place I look when I think that we might have a misconception of our reality is for mysteries and anomalies, right? Here's one. Do you guys remember this one? The dress that part of the people saw it as blue and black and the other part of the people saw it as white and gold. And so it became this viral thing. What do you see? What do you see? And yeah, people didn't all see the same thing, even though it was the same dress. And several scientists got together and did lots of really good studies. I'm like, that's good thinking, to figure out why it was that people are perceiving color so differently. So they did surveys of people who had never seen the dress before online or heard of it or anything. And then they broke them down into categories, like by age. Do older people see it one way and younger people another? By job. Do people who stare at a computer screen all day for their job, like maybe they build up a tolerance to blue light, to them it's like putting on blue blocker glasses or something. Like, what would make people see differently? And they came up with lots of different, I'll put a couple links down below in the description box. They came up with lots of, really good theories about it. And I'm glad they're looking into all the different possibilities. But for me, I'm going to have a one-track mind because I'm trying to sort of make a point here. I think that it is genetic. I just think it's a genetic difference. We are all descendants from so many different bloodlines, a huge melting pot of bloodlines. And I think that, yeah, those genetic differences, the genes that we carry and how our eyes are actually programmed, and I think it's just a spectrum of reality, of how we as a human race see reality, perceive reality. But I think it was more purely distinct in the bloodlines, in the ancient bloodlines. Another example would be if you guys have seen that documentary, What the Bleep Do We Know, about physics and all of this type of perception stuff. And they gave that one example of the invisible ships. And I know there will be some people out there who love and adore the Facebook fact checkers and think that they would never ever lie to them. And this has been debunked, but it hasn't. I've actually looked into it, and there are several accounts of this. When the Europeans came over to, quote, the New World over here in the Americas, and they encountered certain Native American tribes, the tribes could not see them. And there's all sorts of, psychological theories about it and stuff. But again, I believe it's just genetic. So is it just a coincidence that Native American tribes claim that they came up from the underworld after the last cataclysm and that they had been living underground with the, quote, ant people? And we know that these aliens and these Nephilim have been doing genetic interbreeding, hybridization programs, and all of this other type of augmented reality technological experiments on humanity. In fact, here is one encounter from Linda Moulton Howell's Earth Files from an alien abductee who specifically reports these insectoid aliens. Over here on the right-hand side, she drew this picture. This was what she drew of her encounter. And she said in the underground bases, it was the insectoids that were in charge. They look just like ant people. And the grays were like the worker bees, sort of like Tesla Bot 10.0. And they were controlled, performing the telepathic, synthetic telepathy, the telepathic orders coming from these ant people. Sort of like Zuckerberg's control the device with your brainwaves, like that. And what were they doing? They were creating human bodies. They were cloning bodies and creating avatars.
I'm Intelligence Gray, who walks over to a bed-like apparatus upon which there is lying a male human, and the Gray reaches down, and Linda even asked me, could this be possible? Are they doing this in front of me like a hologram? Because this is what occurs. The Gray's long 4 fingers just seem to pass through the man's chest. Shows it to Linda Porter, and she gets telepathic thoughts like this. It is important that the entity, and she gets the symbol or gets communication that when they say entity, they are meaning soul, spirit. That the man's entity and this particular container of the man's body, it's important that the soul remain inside of such a container for a longer period of time than the man's body is willing to give, because the man is dying of heart disease. And the Gray communicates that they are letting this version of the man die, but over in a tube. And when there's a gesture, now she sees that there are these tubes that have various people in them. And one she recognizes in the tube, that has light above and light below, is a man who looks a little bit younger than the man on the table. And the Gray being communicates telepathically to her, because it is important for the soul spirit, that he uses the word entity, to stay inside of this type of container. We are going to revivify him in this cloned body, in this tube that we can preserve and control. And we are going to put him in Australia, and in his home in the United States, he will die.
So if we still have modern day reports of these, quote, ant people, who we now call interdimensional aliens, who live underground in these underground bases, cloning and genetically engineering humans as a replacement migration type program, where they take those people and then place them on the surface of the earth in different countries, do you think it's possible that maybe we are talking about the same thing when we have origin stories from certain Native American tribes saying that they also lived underground with these ant people, and they also were brought out of caves to repopulate the surface of the earth? Do you think it's possible that they were genetically manipulated in some way? Is it a coincidence then that Native Americans reportedly did not see the world the same way that, say, people from Europe saw it? Literally, I mean, not like, oh, we just don't see things the same. No, like two different dimensions. We're not perceiving the same dimension. It's not outlandish to take these historic records at face value. Perhaps when they said invisible ships, they actually mean invisible. Just like I cannot see what a bat can see. I just can't see it. But a bat can see it, so it exists, but I can't see it. And that's not something psychological like, oh, I'm not used to seeing big boats, so I didn't know what I was looking at, so it was magically invisible to me. No, not that crap. I actually cannot see what a bat can see. I simply do not see in infrared. And I believe these historical accounts are evidence of just that thing, that there are races among us, especially Gothic descendants of those Germanic tribes, that are seeing in a lower frequency, in an infrared frequency. And we'll get more into that in a minute. But what I want to play right now is this clip from the video I put up a couple years ago, Who Runs the World, Black Magic, Black Markets, Black Ops, Men in Black, because in there I had listed several other nations that have records of the same exact thing that the Native Americans reported. That there were people who came up out of the ground, they came out of caves, they came out of holes in the ground, out of this underworld, or out of underground bunkers or something, and they report these strange people coming up and infiltrating society and repopulating the surface of the earth. It's very similar to the replacement migration that we were talking about with the orphan trains, that the breeding programs like Lebensborn and stuff on the surface of the earth, while they were shipping them out by the trainload to different parts of the United States, it seems that there's another iteration, an older iteration of the same philosophy, a literal breeding program, or as Donald Marshall would put it, cloning labs in the underworld who are producing people and then sending them out onto the surface of the earth. And then we wonder why we have this phenomenon that we call NPCs, that it seems like there's a hive mind among us. And again, we can't forget etymology. We have to apply that science of word origins, because an orphan isn't just, a child whose parents can't take care of them, or a child whose parents died or something like that. That's what we think today because we've been so dumbed down about world history. But the word orphan actually originates from an ancient Orphic religion called Orphism or Orphicism. It's from the mysteries of Dionysus, the mystery schools of Apollo and Dionysus. It originates from the concept of the fallen angels. When they rebelled against our Holy Father, they were fatherless. They became fatherless. So in turn, all of their descendants would be orphans, a second root race that was apart from God, the second tree in the garden, right? There's the descendants of Adam, the children of God, and then there's a second root race that we were told not to intermingle with. And these are the ancient seed wars. And God said that the seed of Adam and Eve would crush the serpent's head. Some people call them the Hyperboreans, but again, that we have that flip in the New Age movement, the inversion of everything, which is what they believe. They believe in the inversion, the Illuminati families. I like the way Nathan Reynolds, the author of Snatched from the Flames, One Man's Journey to Uncover, quote, the family secrets buried in his blood-stained past. He comes from one of these family bloodlines. He was in like the lower level, not like the high up Illuminati beyond the CIA, that type of stuff. Although there's a lot of overlap, but there's also a lot of compartmentalization. I like the way he gave a pretty down-to-earth presentation, testimony of the things that he saw and experienced at that level.
You come from a family that people have described it as Illuminati family. Is that how you would describe it?
I come from a family that they believe they are descendants of the old gods. They believe that they are carriers of a seed line that gives them the divine right to rule. And that is what gives them justification spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, scientifically to dominate the lesser species known as humans. Humans literally means a lesser species of man. And they do not believe they are a human in the same way. They believe they are something other than. And that's descendants of this hierarchical ruling species that is from the celestial realm that descended in the days of Jared and came down and procreated with the daughters of men, and that they still trace their seed line back to Gilgamesh, till Nimrod. And so this is what the dynastic families believe they have, is a superiority in their genetics on one side and the ability to commune with the divine. And so their children are progenitors of these, some might call them abreactions, mutations, these skills, psychic abilities, that kind of stuff, all variants of it. And so they raise up their children in this path with which involves a tremendous amount of shattering of the soul and the identity, so that there's compartmentalization within, and it allows them the ability to train their child up in a way that makes them conducive towards the family. I call them the family. That's what I called them. It's a better word for mafia than anything else. But no, we didn't call ourselves, like my family wouldn't ever call themselves Illuminists. They're Luciferian, that's for certain. They worship Hallel and Shahar, as he's really known, but different reasons than what people are ascribed to, So on one side of it, I've seen physical beings that are definitely not like our animals up here come out of these spaces from inside the earth. I've seen in deep underground military bases, dogmen, like you would kind of describe them, some more humanized. And I think a lot of those were experimentation and genetic splicing. I think a lot of that was gene editing stuff that I've seen. But I do believe that some of these things are holdovers from the old days. They're the last of their kinds, and they've been breeding them, right? And I believe that that's the stuff that's prophesied that's going to come back out and cause the hearts of men to stop for fear of looking after these things that are coming up on the earth.
It's like that movie Extinction that I used for the base of that series I did a few back, where the plot twist at the end is that the synthetics ruling the earth believed that they were the humans. They didn't know, because all of the history of the ancient AI wars had been erased from their memory. And that's why we're talking about the hidden history right now. The records of the Hyperboreans, or the second root race, clearly describe the fall of the fallen angels, falling through the dimensions from a higher frequency into the Middle Earth frequency, and then eventually into the subterranean infrared frequencies. So they were falling. There, it's the bottomless pit. So they began in the celestial kingdom, and then they fell in density down to where they became material in this world, where the Bible says, woe to the earth because Satan has come down to you. And so there was a material kingdom, Tartarus, the Tartarian Empire, this demonic kingdom that actually reigned on the earth. But they continued to fall. They're falling angels. So as they fell in frequency and fell through the dimensions, then, they started out as spiritual entities on one end of the spectrum, and then they became material in our world, and now they are spiritual entities on a lower frequency, on the hellish frequencies. So we don't see the actual fallen angels on earth as such, but we do see the Nephilim descendants, or the genetically engineered avatars that they make, and, that sort of thing. They're trying to resurrect them, but it's not going to happen, although we will talk about the key to the bottomless pit and Solomon's key and David's key and what they're trying to do with CERN. But for right now, I just wanted to mention it to kind of tie together the old world order and the new world order and the seed wars and who these people are and who they think they are and why all of this is happening. And in fact, that's why the witch trials of the Middle Ages and the Dark Ages had these weird tests, like throwing these people into water and seeing if they would float. I mean, that all sounds so superstitious, but we were talking about density. Because not only do these Illuminati bloodlines and the mystery schools retain the knowledge of their bloodlines and origins, but in the medieval era, like I said, the Dark Ages started only like 500 years after Jesus walked the earth and split the timeline. So there was still a remembrance at that time as well amongst the saints of God. The two kingdoms on earth, the kingdom of heaven had come, and also the kingdom of hell was still here. So the humans had the knowledge as well, and that's why they did these strange practices about density. Throw them in the water, do they float?
While the Polarians were completely non-physical, the Hyperboreans gradually became more physical. They lost the Polarians' imperviousness to nature. While they still couldn't drown in water, they could be burnt by fire. They were now beginning to be subjected to the harsh conditions of the elements, and they suffered in that loss. Hyperboreans needed to eat food. In exchange, the Hyperboreans had much more vivid sensory perceptions than their Polarian ancestors. Although the notion that sensory perceptions could be either pleasurable or painful was a new concept.
And then they fell into all of this debauchery. So the mysteries of Dionysus, what they did, well, let's see if I can pull it up. Here we go, the Dionysus mysteries, were a ritual of ancient Greece and Rome which sometimes used intoxicants and other trance-inducing techniques to remove inhibitions. It was used to provide, quote, liberation for these men and women who took part in these orgies. That's why, like at the French Olympics, the god Dionysus was equated to the god of wine and that sort of thing. But it was other trance-inducing chemicals, not just wine. It was basically like a ditty sex cult that they would drug these children and use them for sexual orgies and things like that. And to this day, like the 320,000 missing immigrant children that Biden and Harris brought in to this country and then secretly trafficked all around on airplanes in the middle of the night and delivered these, quote, orphans to people who were not even their family, their parents. And then they just disappeared. And this is all part of that Orphic, sadistic, fallen angel religion. And that's why I juxtaposed Kathy O'Brien and Bryce Taylor and those testimonies from the MK Ultra trance-inducing mind control techniques, because they report the same thing, that they weren't just subjected to, quote, trance-inducing techniques, but they were also sex trafficked. So right here, Orphism or Orphicism is the name given to a set of religious beliefs and practices originating in the ancient Greek and Hellenistic world. In Orphic belief, this myth describes humanity as having a dual nature, a body inherited from the Titans, which we know are the Nephilim races, which will tie into Benjamin Brody's testimony, and a divine spark or soul inherited from Dionysus. So like in the Linda Moulton Howe alien abductee presentation, where she talked about them transferring this soul, this entity, they believe that that soul is inherited from this fallen angel, this pagan god Dionysus. Orphics believe that they would, after death, spend eternity alongside Orpheus and the other heroes being the demigods, who are the genetic hybrid descendants from the fallen angels, which the Bible confirms in Genesis 6:4. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them. The same became the mighty men which were of old, the old world order, men of renown. And if you scroll down to the first search result, you'll see that that is also translated the Nephilim. or exactly as the orphan cult translates it, Gabor, as the word heroes. And the Bible agrees with that. The Bible does not dispute that they will spend eternity alongside the fallen angels and demons, the empire of Satan, Tartarus. They will indeed. Matthew 25:41. Then shall he say also unto them on the left hand, Depart from me, ye cursed, into everlasting fire prepared for the devil and his angels. So eternity in hell. But, they don't see it that way. So the Orphics believed that they would, after death, spend eternity alongside Orpheus and the other heroes. But the uninitiated, they believed, would be reincarnated indefinitely. So that's the plebe level of the souls trapped by these ancient fallen angels, that they are just like the Buddhist religion and the Tibetans and, the Wiccans and the New Agers. Like, they get caught in the soul trap and they're in the time loop forever, indefinitely, in this reincarnation loop, which is nothing more than the matrix created by the fallen angels themselves. Okay, I got off on a little bit of a tangent there. What I was getting ready to show you was that clip from the older video that I did showing all of the different civilizations that say these people, whoever these people are coming up on the surface of the earth out of caves and holes and underground bunkers and stuff. Not just the Native Americans who report being in the underground city with the ant people, but there are reports on almost every continent of the same exact thing. After the Passover, after the cataclysm passes over, then like the phoenix rising from the ashes, they come up out of the underworld, they take over the surface of the earth again. Everything that is salvageable, which were their own old world order buildings, now become the new world order. And they put their banks in there and their government buildings, their city halls, everything that is salvageable, they just found, right? That's what the mud flood community and these people that research the old world order, that's what they caught on to, that word origins, right? They founded this, they founded that. They didn't build any of it. They found it, they find it, they claim it, it's just theirs. But notice, as per the Great Deception, only these bodies that they make, these clones or the seed bank that they have, the DNA database that they have, the only ones to resurface after the cataclysm are the ones who look like us, the ones in human bodies. But all of these other creatures, even though, like Steve Quayle and Timothy Alberino did that incredible documentary on Sardinia and how all of the giant bones were found everywhere. Everybody just tilling up their garden for crops. They were finding them everywhere. And they were told to call the Smithsonian or call the Vatican. And all of them vanished. Everything that they turned over they thought were going to museums vanished. And that's happened all over the world. Likewise, that's L.A. Marzulli's calling, and he has been, quote, on the trail of the Nephilim for a long time. And then we have just the obvious stuff that they can't hide, like all of the ancient Egyptian art where it's all these different humanoid hybrid creatures, half lions and humans and bird-headed humans and dog-headed humans and, all of that. But yet, after the cataclysm, all of those creatures remain in the underworld, and they send out these guys out of the cave, the ruling class. Celebrity clones, political clones, whatever, the ruling class. And they are the operatives, or maybe you would call them the ambassadors to the surface of the earth, the representatives of the hidden hand, the real controllers who are still underground. And we've all been going over their hidden gang signs for years and years and decades. Everybody pretty much knows by now, but you haven't heard about all of it. I did do a couple of videos myself on it, on the hidden hand and the masters of the veil and the laurel leaves of the laurel wreath crowns, like you used to see in ancient Rome, that ties into the Nobel laureates, and then Laurel Canyon where the Star Factory is, where they pump out the musicians. If you can come up high enough to see that none of these are isolated incidents or anomalies or anything, and it's just one big picture, and it all fits together seamlessly. As JFK said in his speech before they assassinated him, it is a tight-knit highly organized network, crime syndicate. They reserve the Tartarian demon spawn, right, in hiding. The shadows, the shadow government, the real string pullers, the ones controlling the hive. Those controllers stay hidden in the underworld while these people craft the narrative that there's going to be these UFOs coming from outer space and they're going to be our saviors and our creators. And, they save all the high technology. They keep all that secret. All they do is kind of spoon feed it to us through these guys, through the ruling class, so that they always stay in control. They always stay rich. They always stay, as our slave masters here on the surface. But they have slave masters as well in the underworld. But anyway, back to the hidden history. One thing that the Old World Order and the Mudflood community very quickly were the missing heads, that so many of these statues and the artwork that is left over from the old world has missing heads. And everybody knows that obviously, because of the weak points, that heads and hands would be the first to break off of, statues like this. So we're not stupid. Everybody gets that. But some of this artwork on the cathedrals, it will like trim out a giant arch or something, and there will be like 30 or 40 small angelic looking figures, and every single one of them will have the head chipped off. And I remember coming across this back when I was studying Jerusalem and the Temple Mount. And everybody says, how they always say, oh, well, Jesus would look Middle Eastern because that's the people who live there now. It's like, that's like saying the Egyptians now should have bird heads or something. No, the Egyptians now are humans who have moved in and occupied that area of those ruins. They're not the original Egyptians. And I noticed early on in the tours of Israel that the cave art, all of the cave art, the figures that were painted on the walls of the caves in there were their heads were pickaxed out. So that's not a statue. So it's not like the head could just roll off. And plus, all of these missing heads on all these statues aren't laying next to them. They're gone. Like, they're gone. There's all of the rubble and ruins, but all the heads have been picked up. But anyway, back to the cave art. Yeah, there's no reason. That's like flat wall art, okay? It was obvious someone had taken a pickaxe, and they even said that on the tour, that someone had taken a pickaxe and pickaxed the head part of the picture off of every single one of the figures. And the Lord works like that with me. It'll be like such a small detail, and it'll just stick in my craw, and I can't ever let it go until the rest of the revelation comes. So that really stuck with me for decades and decades until the Great Awakening progressed to this point where this community started revealing their truth, and then I was like, oh, yeah. So although they worked diligently, these people, these ruling class people, all through the Crusades, gathering up all of the records and books and burning everything they couldn't carry away to the Vatican underground archives, and the Knights Templar and the Nazis going around gathering every artifact. I mean, they worked diligently to hide everything. But, you can't scrub the whole earth. So we do have records like St. Christopher with his head on, and he was a hybrid. He was a Gentile, a genetic hybrid. Again, the Hebrews are the humans, the Gentiles are the genetic hybrids. See, that's a fundamental thing that we have to get over. They've told us that we are the Gentiles, and that's why the whole earth has rejected the Holy Bible, except for a small handful of people that are like, well, we don't understand it, but I have God in my heart. I know my God, and this is why they don't understand it. It's not a little handful of people over there in that desert that the Bible is for. God is not a racist. In fact, he even said salvation has come to the Gentiles. And his apostles and disciples were like, no, God forbid it. That can't be true. They didn't want to bring the gospel to the Gentiles. But God said yes. He actually called Paul to be an apostle to the Gentiles. In fact, I'll play a little clip here from the channel My Lunch Break. He does great work on this old world order stuff. And he's really funny and witty, too, so you'll enjoy it.
The hypogeum is an enormous subterranean structure excavated 4,524 years ago lifting huge blocks of limestone. All thanks to this group yet again for their input. And I thought that we had covered most of this topic, but I kept digging, and we are not even close. Today, we are going back for more. For anyone new, we are speaking about the Hypogeum, located in Malta, more specifically, in the town of Paola, where they found this underground temple in 1902, discovering it while constructing houses, blocking the public, all of us, from the area for nearly a decade, where they found 7,000 elongated skulls, destroying most of them, and then hiding the remaining ones from the public. And we have shown all of this. Now today, I wanted to go back because there are things that blew my mind right here in episode 97. One of the most striking characteristics of this location is that some of the chambers appear to have been cut in imitation of the architecture of the above ground megalithic temples. Doing all of this underground. Are you seeing what this means? I'll keep going. Where they found false bays and windows. Underground windows. Can you see very clearly now? This temple is underground now, but I don't believe that it always was. Most importantly, the ceiling with one ring of carved stone overhanging the one below to supposedly imitate a roof. Imitating a roof? Or was this just a roof? Was this a temple? Just on the ground level when it was constructed, with the event that we've talked about so many times, burying it, and in doing so, killing the 7,000 plus individuals inside. Is the previous civilization, just like we found here, buried under our feet right now, all over the world, and we have yet to find it? And to prove our point here, the mainstream thinks this was some sort of burial ritual, saying that it appears that the bodies were probably left exposed until the flesh had decomposed and fallen off, when in reality, these individuals were most likely killed on the spot from the event that took place. And if there were any that didn't die immediately, they would have been trapped underground. Individuals were not buried separately, but piled onto each other. This is all according to our friends right up here at the top. It makes so much more sense that this was not a burial site at all. It was originally above ground, and they were then trapped under the ground in this event and tossed the deceased into the pile.
Anyway, here's that clip from that old video that I told you I was going to play like 7 hours ago. Just pointing out that there are records in all of these different countries of these people coming up out of the ground and out of the caves. And although they look human, it's really not beyond possibility that they are not humans at all. You know, we talked about the Darrow and the Shaver mysteries in that Welcome to Westworld video that I did, and that had all of these reports that people were saying that, yes, they encountered these beings, these Darrow, detrimental robots, that these were not humans. And for anybody who scoffs at that idea, you're just not educated. You're just not scientifically educated. I mean, they're saying it openly to our faces. I've played the clips ad nauseum of Yuval Noah Harari saying that we are probably the last generation of Homo sapiens, that they are going to synthetics. They are making us, these are transhumanist. They are turning us into synthetics and cyborgs. This is real. So if they're doing it right now in front of our faces, we simply can't discount that these people who look like humans that are coming out of these underground bases or underground bunkers or underworld cities or whatever they're coming out of caves and infiltrating into society, knowing what we know now scientifically. I mean, right here on the screen, he's been talking about it for over 20 years, turning people into synthetics that are merged with artificial intelligence. I mean, that pretty much sounds exactly like the Darrow, right? So here's that clip listing the different nations that people have seen these beings coming out. Humans who had been taken captive by this Babylonian empire and were taken down into the underworld. And then after the cataclysm, they reemerged. Ancestors of the Inca claim to come from caves east of Cusco, Peru. Another Native American tribes say that their ancient ancestors emerged from a subterranean land through a cave at the north side of the Missouri River. In Northern Ireland, they claim that there's a tunnel that leads to a land of the subterranean race who are believed to have induced Druidism in Ireland. This is again related to them establishing these different religions on the earth. In the Middle Ages, an ancient German myth held that certain mountains hold a portal to the inner earth. A Russian legend says that an ancient Siberian tribe traveled to a cavern city to live inside the earth. In Nordic tradition, it was known as the home of the dark elves. In Hindu mythology, the underworld or inner earth is referred to as Patala. In Cuba, some of the Cuban peoples record that their ancestors emerged in ancient times from two caves in a mountain underground. Mexican folklore tells of a cave in a mountain and that Mexico was possessed by devilish creatures who came from inside the earth. Again in Ireland, medieval knights and saints went on pilgrimages to a cave on Station Island, where they made journeys inside the earth. Brazilian Indians claim that their forefathers emerged in ancient times from an underground land and that many of their ancestors still remain inside the earth. Of course, we all know of the most common one because of the New Age movement and because of the Nazi contact with the Tibetan monks. But in Tibet, the Buddhists believe that this underworld is known as Shambhala and Shangri-La, and that they have been in contact with the, quote, king of the world for centuries, and that their leader, the Dalai Lama, is one person, has been one person that is reincarnated over and over and over. Okay, so also over in Asia, not just Russia, but China, there are several gates to Agartha, supposedly. In fact, it's very interesting talking about Manchurian candidates and mind control coming out of that area during the wars. Quick list of some of the known entrances or claimed legendary mythological entrances. One would be in Kentucky at the Mammoth Cave, which is weird because I had family that lived right there. And there was a Bigfoot sighting that made all the news when they lived there just a couple years ago. You can go here. This is 2019. I mean, this is all mainstream news. This is Newsweek. Shots fired after alleged Bigfoot encounter in Mammoth Cave. So yeah, right up till modern times, these creatures are seen coming out of the caves there. And like I mentioned before, there are several in Brazil and Argentina and Ecuador. And we've talked a lot about that. That's why the Nazis were there. It wasn't a political thing. They didn't have to get on U-boats to go to Antarctica to access this underworld. And in that video, I also listed several of the books that these occult secret societies got their doctrine from. You know, Smoky God, all of these books about the underworld. But I wanted to mention this one in particular that was written in 1922 by a Polish scientist. It was considered factual history by the Nazi Thule Society. It's called Beasts, Men, and Gods. And it talks about this, quote, king of the world who lives in this underworld, who in 1890 had given a timeline to the Lamas about the return of the Nephilim, the externalization of the hierarchy. They didn't want to be in hollow earth anymore. They were coming up to claim the surface of the earth, and that was going to happen in 2029, according to the texts dating all the way back to 1890. It was written, and the Tibetan lamas have it in their documents that these underworld Agartha beings were going to return and make their appearance on the surface of the earth in 2029. And to this very day, the WEF, the United Nations, and all of these occult leaders are telling us to our faces that a great reset is coming. They call it Agenda 2030. So it's supposedly going to be a new world, a new kind of living by 2030. And according to the Tibetan text from the 1800s, that's the return of the Nephilim. And the Bible calls that Mystery Babylon, that they are going to reestablish their fallen angel Babylonian empire on the earth. And from the looks of it, their idea of the new enslaving humanity, just like the ancient Babylonian empire did, is going to be in these hive mind smart cities. Those are the new concentration camps or work camps. They won't have to guard us with guns to make us work. The AI will police us from within our own bodies. The transhumans who are assimilated into it will largely be hive mind. They won't really have free will, but they won't realize it, because just like now with the schizophrenia and the synthetic telepathy and all of the stuff that we talked about earlier, these people will be getting thoughts. The AI will be working on the level of thoughts. So people, just like now, people receive thoughts. The Bible has warned us, and it says, take every thought captive, that the enemy is putting thoughts in your mind. You need to test the spirit to know which thought to act on. That's the situation we are in and have been in for millennia since biblical records. But still to this day, even though we have that technological information in the Bible, people refuse to acknowledge that every thought that pops in their head is not their own, because they've been indoctrinated. The PhD leaders of the transgender movement say openly that that's the agenda, that it is one step, the first step in getting people to accept transhumanism. And it's common knowledge at this point that it is completely linked to the autism spectrum. They're purposely targeting the autistic, those who they know are already linked in to the augmented reality spectrum. They've designed this funnel in psychology and psychiatry to funnel these kids when they come in, and they have, people with Asperger's at the very high end of the autism spectrum. Although they're not disabled, they're fully functional, but they have this robotic nature that Benjamin Brodie will talk about. So the first thing they do is they take these autistic kids and they throw them in the funnel, in the meat grinder, right? And they never tell them anything about the cause or anything about AI or anything about the transhumanist movement. They just funnel them through this system where they start sexually mutilating them, confusing them, and, into the next step to train people that in fluidity, right? That whatever entity comes in and out of you, you just roll with it. You do not take that thought captive. You actually make that your identity. And it can be fluid, whatever demon comes in and out, that's you now. That couldn't possibly be an intrusive thought from an outside entity who does not have your best interest at heart. No, they say identify as it. And this is not my opinion. These PhDs who are running the transgender movement, they write about it openly in their books, like here on the screen, From Transgender to Transhumanism, a Manifesto on the Freedom of Form. This particular edition goes back to 2011, that they have been, this transgender movement has never been organic. Everybody knows that, except for the people who have been assimilated into it. Then, they're in the cult. They can't hear you. The cult tells them, if your family or friends or neighbors or anybody try to tell you anything besides what we do, it's because they're trying to manipulate you and control you. Only listen to the cult and cut off all contact with your family, to the point that the government will take a child from a parent and give it to the government to sexually mutilate. I mean, this is so far gone. This is serious. We're at endgame here. But anyway, this was all the way back in 2011, and there's an earlier edition of this book that was called The Apartheid of Sex. And it basically says exactly what I just said, that the transgender movement is one step to get people ready for transhumanism. That humans must be psychologically brainwashed and manipulated to be prepared for the transhumanist agenda. And to do that, they have to disassociate from their own identity, disassociate from their own biology, disassociate from their own bodies, and allow this freedom of form, allow these entities to take control of them, to mind control them, and then they will be transhuman. And they won't even seek out real deliverance and real healing because they're told those thoughts are their own, that it's all just coming from their mind. But in reality, they're already being tortured by this hive mind technology. So I believe that people in those cognizant cities will not even realize that they are being controlled on the thought level. They will just think, these are my thoughts. I want to do this. So it's very, the mark of the beast, it's the saddest thing that will ever happen. It's the soul trap. But on the other end of the spectrum, those people who do retain some free will, they will be exterminated. Klaus Schwab wrote about it in his book. We've shown the excerpts in past videos. I mean, it's Minority Report, that when the AI is policing your thoughts, it's not only putting thoughts in your mind, but it can read your mind, your brain waves, to detect dissent. Actually, Minority Report's a pretty good summary of the situation. There's your predictive programming on this one. We have the transhumanist mad scientists who have linked in the minds, this internet of brains that they've created in the quantum computer, and they're using brain cells from this, quote, secret space program. Those people are trapped in the quantum computer. The autistic people are being linked in against their will.
This will replace the internet. It'll become a brain net. It'll become a brain net.
And then we have Klaus Schwab's pre-crime, that they will be stopping crime, right? It's for the betterment of society, that they will stop crime before it happens. There won't ever be terrorist acts because they're just scanning your brain waves, and if you have that thought, then you can be terminated. They don't need to send a drone like Israel into Gaza or anything. They can just from within your own body. We're seeing it with the spinners. That same exact technology where the AI is controlling your metabolic processes, that they tell us, oh, it's going to be so wonderful. If you have diabetes, the AI will just detect the chemical imbalance and it will produce the proteins and molecules and everything you need in your body. And, it's all going to be this great healing thing. Until the AI wants to shut off your metabolic processes, like all the people who took the COVID injections and had all of these organ failures, or just went to sleep and never woke up, or like the spinners, who just suddenly get shifted into another dimensional perception where they can see something all around them, and then boom, they're shut off. So all of these seemingly unrelated phenomena all are part of the same exact transhumanist program. Once they finish linking your body into the wireless body area network, you're just another device. Just as surely as Stuxnet can shut down a power grid, shut down the internet, shut down your car, shut down your phone, it can shut down your body. It reminds me of that Kingsman movie, Kingsman: The Secret Service. How they secretly put implants in everybody, and then when it came time for the war, they were able to just activate the implants in their enemies. Well, actually, if you've watched the movie, you know that it's two secret societies, like two separate intelligence agencies, and they're sort of in a mob war, and there's all these double agents, and you don't know who to trust. And so the intelligence agency that used the implants to blow up the enemy weren't the actual ones who put the implants in all the people. It was the bad guys who put the implants in all of the people they wanted to control so that they could blackmail them. That if they were dissidents and they didn't do what the evil regime said, then they would just kill them. And sort of like the evil regime in our reality has captured everything. They had captured all of the politicians, the rich elite, they had control of everything. And when it came down to the final battle, though, the good guys in the Secret Service hacked the code and used all the implants to destroy the bad guys. So there's some hopium for you.
Yes, please.
But that's not even the worst of it. There really is a fate worse than death, and that's being eternally trapped in hell. And this AI is already pulling a certain segment of humanity back down into the Dark Ages, almost like the Stranger Things upside down, the inversion. There's a literal inversion in the underworld, and there is technology that can perceive that, like the Santilli telescope, when you invert the lens.
So, let's have a look at the abstract of this science journal. So the abstract is, by using telescopes with concave lenses known as Santilli telescopes, which is trademark is patent pending by the US publicly traded company called Thunder Energies Corporation, which we're going to have also a look at in just a moment. We present for the first time evidence of the apparent existence of entities in a terrestrial environment that are solely visible by these telescopes with concave lenses, while being invisible to our naked eye, and to conventional Galileo telescopes with convex lenses, which entities leave dark images in the background of digital cameras attached to the Santilli telescopes. These entities here are called invisible terrestrial entities of the first kind, or ITE-1, or dark ITE. Then we present also for the first time evidence for the apparent existence in a terrestrial environment of other additional entities that are also visible to telescopes with concave lenses, while being invisible to a naked eye and to conventional telescopes with convex lenses, which entities leave bright images in the background of digital cameras. These additional entities are here called invisible terrestrial entities of the second kind, or ITE-2, or bright ITE. So he's actually made a difference between the dark and the light. It is pointed out that both of these entities generally move in the night sky over sensitive areas, and their behavior suggests unauthorized surveillance.
Not moving. It should be moving, right?
There it is. Oh, did you see it? Oh,
That's
did you
it.
see it? Wow, there it is.
There it is again.
Well, this was in our session last night.
Yes. This is the 150 millimeter telescope. 150. This is in control of this rings. This incontrovertible evidence that that matter and antimatter repel each other.
Okay.
Because with ordinary light, this is impossible. Mm-hmm. You will have a diffraction, namely, then you have a slow, continuous degradation of the light to nothing. That's the diffraction, but not rings. This means that the atmosphere is repelling, its matter is repelling the light emitted by those guys. The Galileo telescope, it is the very principle of our technology. This is the Galileo telescope. So this is the lens. This is we call it isodual light. Enters there, and since this is now convex, now it is dispersed.
It's going to be dispersed.
And then it bounces off, but it does not focus. So that's why pictures of ordinary light, of an ordinary image, of an ordinary object in the Galileo telescope are not disturbed by antimatter light. Mm-hmm. Are not disturbed because antimatter light is dispersed everywhere. Mm-hmm. And it's the opposite of the conjugate. Everything is conjugate of...
Okay, so this brings us back full circle. We originally started all of this conversation talking about these Native American tribes who didn't seem to be viewing the world in the same frequency range as other nations on the earth. And that's what led us into tracing their origins from coming out of the underworld, from living with these ant people, which led us to the genetic experiments that these alien ant people were doing on humans. And it was all to suggest that the reason these ships were invisible to them was because of this genetic engineering, this genetic trait that they had that caused them to be able to see in a different frequency range. Because some of the reports said that these giant ships were just like 400 yards away, and they would paddle right by in their canoes and almost run into them. They just could not see them. But the shaman could see the indentation in the water, and that's why the tribes realized that there were other beings coming to their coast and initially thought that they were the gods because they appeared to be coming from another dimension. And that's why the mainstream just chalks it up to mythology. But this didn't just happen in North America. Similar reports are recorded like amongst the Aborigines in Australia. And since it is my theory that during the Dark Ages, these Gothic races that invaded all those territories and brought all of that Satanism all through that region, it's my theory that they were perceiving in a lower frequency as well. And all of that reminded me of this Native American sacred site on Mount Graham. It's one of their top 4 most sacred sites, because that's where they saw these spiritual entities coming and going in another dimension. So is it any wonder that the Vatican goes and sets up an infrared telescope with some other mechanisms involved? It's not just straight infrared. Allegedly, it's using some of the technology of the Santilli telescope. Remember we talked about the Santilli telescope in the RH negative bloodlines video about how using the concave lens made the telescope able to pick up these entities because of the refraction of the light? And we were talking about that same type of lens technology being applied biologically, that there are weird genetic traits with Rh negative people that they can see spiritually more often than most other people. And they also have a higher rate of the genetic trait of having astigmatisms. And both of those concepts will play into these testimonies we're getting to, that not only are they having experiences in these other realms, like in dream state, almost like lucid dreaming or astral projection, but then as they progressed, they began to see these entities in this realm, in reality. And you'll see when you watch the interviews, they're mainly interpreting that as, how is this possible? Like, did they attach to me? You know, they came from that dimension to this dimension. But I submit that they're always all around us. Spiritual warfare is always happening all around us. What changed were the messenger RNA injections. These are gene therapy injections. People are being genetically augmented. And as they progressed, they were able to see those entities in everyday life when they should have been invisible. But I want to play this clip for you about these night vision goggles that were given to the soldiers in Vietnam for, it was like a 60-day beta test. And it was obviously some technology that they knew was not regular night vision goggles. And these aren't the kind that I used in the Marine Corps, or most of us use, or the people use nowadays to see UFOs. So night vision goggles can still pick up things that aren't visible to us, you know, UFOs and that sort of interdimensional technology. Which in itself, to me, isn't that right there evidence enough to say that we can't discount those reports that Native Americans could be standing, 400 yards from a ship and not even be able to see it, that it would be completely invisible? People with these night vision goggles, like one guy, I remember him showing, there was a UFO right over the tree outside his house, just sitting there, completely silent, completely invisible. How long had it been there? Does it sit there every night? What is this? It was completely invisible to him. And yet with a very basic pair of night vision goggles, not this top secret technology, just the ones they allow the public to have, there was a ship. Granted, it wasn't a sailing ship, but it was an airship, but still, same concept. Only one, I'm saying, is biological sight in these frequencies, and one is technological. Well, the biological is bio and tech, but you know what I'm saying. And likewise, these UFOs here on the screen that were taped over Germany with basic night vision technology remind me of all those objects that were seen over the Nuremberg, Germany area that were recorded in those printed papers of the 1500s. The only difference is they weren't using night vision goggles, which to me is evidence of those Illuminati Nephilim bloodlines that they could see these things. Their reality was not the same as our reality. So there's that. But this technology that I want to show you in these night vision goggles that the military was experimenting with over half a century ago was a completely different technology. It was actually a combination technology. It had 2 or 3 different types of technology all woven together to get the effect that these soldiers witnessed. And I believe this is the technology that holds the key to both what the people in the Gothic region were seeing in their reality that was just part of their biological makeup, and also holds the key to what these realm walkers are experiencing, because they are experiencing dark realms. When they are tuned into that state, it's, how people report the astral, that they see the city of night and they see this entire other reality. And when you listen to them explain it, they explain that it is a layer of this reality. So it's a shift. It's literally a paradigm shift, a dark shift that is biological, where I believe they are seeing the same thing that the descendants of the Nephilim see. Many people have said in the UFO community for years and years, going back to the 1970s, around the time that these goggles were beta tested in Vietnam, several whistleblowers from those underground bases after the Roswell crash have come out and said that we got technologies like fiber optics and night vision goggles from these, quote, aliens, which we know are the Nephilim. They're the demon spawn. This is the frequency they see in. This is the frequency they live in. It's the frequency of Tartarus, the Tartarian Empire. See what I'm saying? That's why we see gargoyles and monsters and demons all over their architecture, because that's the world they lived in. Even though for a brief season, like the records of the Hyperboreans, a dark age, if you will, they overlapped with us in this density. And we could perceive them, and they could perceive us, just like we can perceive bats, and they can perceive us, but we'll never see the world the same way. Just watch this clip about the night vision goggles and tell me, does this not sound exactly like all of these gargoyles and entities that we see depicted on the Gothic cathedrals and in the Gothic art?
So my father did 3 tours in the Vietnam War. And in his second tour, he was advanced enough in rank, and he was there, I think, 11 or 12 months. And when he was in country at that point, he was he's always been a field officer, and came up in the military through the Korean War and a battlefield commission. And so, the military likes guys like him, and they let him be in charge of a couple of different projects. One of the projects that he was in charge of at the time was this technology that they introduced into Vietnam that almost brought the war to a standstill. Wow. And this technology was a night vision goggle, but it's not night vision as we have it now, okay? Because the night vision goggle was done in the red spectrum. And so when my father came back from Vietnam...
You mean infrared or...
No. I'll explain.
Ordinary red.
Oh, ordinary red. Okay. So instead of seeing... When you look at a night vision goggles now, you see green. Everything is translated into green for you. And human eye sees green, more colors, shades of green than any other color. Food.
So that's clever then.
Correct. But see, here's the thing. It started off as red. And so the night vision goggles were introduced to helicopter pilots and gunnery people in Vietnam. And I won't hesitate as to I won't guess as to which year it was that they introduced them, but my father was part of this initial experiment with the troops that he commanded. And it was a disaster because the image was presented in red pixels, not green. And because of the technology being used at that time, it created very interesting effects that they could not deal with. So you had some officers that were part of this cadre or this cohort of other officers that were all testing these new technologies for the military that had their troops always use these goggles. And those units became self-destructive. They went down in a horrid situation. My father was extremely practical, didn't want to see himself get destroyed in any way, wanted to return and get out. So as soon as he saw what was going on with these goggles, he had his people take them off. And he actually got praise from the military for the way that he dealt with all of this. But the effect was this. A gunner in a helicopter would have no problem using these goggles, and only everything is showing up as a sort of a faint reddish image. And it was true night vision the way we have it now, and even a greater depth, because you could also flip it and get an extra layer that was sort of yellowish that would be heat signatures as well. And they don't have those combined anymore in these goggles. Anyway, the goggles that were presented to the gunners, and my father tells the story of the very first time they're out with them, and they're flying along, and he's in the front of the helicopter with the pilot, and all of a sudden, in a very peaceful area, not anything going on at all, the gunner in his on the starboard side of his helicopter starts firing wildly at their height, not at anything on the ground, but at an area that he was shooting at, and basically causing other helicopters in their little flotilla to have to react. And my father goes on back to the gunner, basically demanding, "What the hell, dude? What are you shooting at?" And the kid is just sweating profusely, and his eyes are just dilated beyond belief. And my dad thought he was dealing with another heroin addict, but this was before it had gotten really bad in Vietnam, and the kid was not exhibiting those kind of symptoms. He was reacting to what he had seen. And he's describing to my father that he was shooting at these basically flying demons that were flying alongside the helicopter. And he knew they were coming to get him because they were gesturing at him and they could see him. And so he reacted, and he started shooting his Bren gun